From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalyst, the podcast that explores the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. This is your place to hear how local leaders are building trust, bringing people together, and making government work better, one community at a time. Our guests share the moments that shaped them, the challenges they faced, the lessons they learned, and the wisdom they carry forward. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow or subscribe so you're always a part of the conversation. Today's episode is part of a monthly series sponsored by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. RELI supports and connects regional leaders across Northern Virginia, equipping them to tackle complex challenges through collaboration and innovation. By sponsoring this episode, RELI is sharing those insights with local leaders everywhere, and we're truly grateful for that. My guest today, David Tarter, brings a wealth of experience to every role he takes on. He's the executive director of both the Center for Real Estate Entrepreneurship and the Masters in Real Estate Development program at George Mason University. Before stepping into higher education, David served 5 terms as mayor of Falls Church, Virginia, a small but ambitious city in the Washington, D.C. metro area. He's also an attorney with decades of experience in land use and real estate law. Across each chapter of his career, David has remained focused on what it takes to build strong communities, whether in City Hall, the courtroom, or the classroom. I'm especially looking forward to exploring how collaboration, trust, and steady leadership have shaped David's journey and what practical lessons his experience offers for local leaders everywhere. David Tarter, welcome to Community Catalysts.
Thank you so much, Matt. I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Hey, David, before we get into all of your leadership roles in government and higher education, I was hoping we could take a step back. As we prepared for today, you mentioned that some of your earliest experiences, that was washing dishes at 13 and rowing in college, and even your early work as a land use attorney, that all helped shape how you think about leadership. Tell me something about what you learned from those experiences that has served you throughout your career.
I had my first job when I was 13, as you said, washing dishes in the back of a restaurant close to where I lived. And I worked all through high school, bussing tables. And I got to meet a whole lot of people from a whole lot of different backgrounds. And one thing I took away from that is everyone is deserving of respect. Everyone has value. Every opinion has value. And that's something I've carried with me throughout my entire career. I mentioned to you earlier in our prior conversation about rowing. So I spent my college years rowing at the University of Virginia. And one thing about rowing is you all have to be on time. You all have to work together. If somebody in the boat's not rowing the same way as every other person in the boat won't go fast, and it just won't work. And so that's something that has stuck with me as well. The idea that you really have to get together with people. You have to collaborate, work together. Everyone has an equal part and role to play, certainly in a boat. Also, with respect to land use, so as you mentioned, I've done a fair amount of land use work over my years. And one thing that's been very important in that role is to make sure everyone's heard. Everyone isn't a decider, but everyone gets the ability and the right to speak and be heard. And I think that goes an awful long way, both in land use and in government, is to make sure that everyone has a voice, everyone feels heard, is of value and respected. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, doesn't mean you have to do what they want to do, but everyone has the right and ability to speak their mind and to be heard and listened to.
David, there are a lot of leaders who are out in the front of the parade all by themselves. All of those things together sound like you're very much in the pack, that leadership is not about standing out from everyone else.
Well, I think leadership is about having a vision, but it's also collaboration. You're never going to implement your vision without the assistance and collaboration of other folks. So, it's both. You have to be out in front a little bit, I think, with a vision. You have to lead. Lead doesn't mean following. It means being maybe a bit ahead of everyone in some ways, but it also means bringing everyone along with you. And if you don't have a consensus, then you need to build a consensus because you're not going to get things done. And that means compromise, means working with other people. Doesn't mean, being out in front and getting your way and demanding your way, but really trying to build a consensus so that folks are all working in the same direction, rowing in the same direction, if you will. And once you have that, it's extremely powerful, I've found, in local government and really all aspects of life.
I want to ask you to tell us a bit about Falls Church. For those people who are not familiar with the area, I did my little bit of my background homework. So it's a small independent city in Northern Virginia, just under 15,000 residents, highly educated population, strong schools, a reputation for civic engagement. Tell us about the character of the community. What makes it a distinctive place to live?
Well, I mean, you mentioned a fair amount of them. It's a small place. In Virginia, you're either a city or a county, but Falls Church is a city. I think there's something like 37 independent cities in Virginia. We're one of those. And I think there's something just like 41 in the whole United States. So in some ways, it's a fairly unique composition. But as a small place, we have to provide all our own services. So we have our own school system. We have our own fire department or our own police. Everything is really provided by the city itself. But we don't actually provide it. We pay a neighboring jurisdiction to provide those services for us. So we've really got to work hard in a lot of ways because we don't have economies of scale to pay for things. But getting more broadly back to your question, it's a really wonderful community. I grew up in Northern Virginia. You can basically throw a rock to where I was born in Alexandria, but it really took coming to Falls Church, I think, to find the community that was right for me. It's a small place. People know each other. You're in a very sophisticated, large, broader community, the DC metropolitan area, but it feels like a small town. But it's just a great place. It's a walkable community. It's a place where people know each other. They greet each other. Great schools. People are very loyal to the community. It's a wonderful place.
What was the impetus for you to run for public office in the first place? What got you started on that track?
Well, so I didn't really actively seek it out. My first foray into public government in Falls Church was my wife saw an ad in the local paper looking for someone to join the Economic Development Authority, and they asked for people who had real estate development experience, land use experience, all the things that I did professionally. My wife showed it to me and said, "This is you. You do all this stuff. Why don't you apply?" And so I did. And pretty soon I was the chair of that group, the Economic Development Authority in the City of Falls Church. And people, particularly in elected office, were asking my opinion about development and the like because I had expertise in that. I've been doing it professionally for many years. And so I just got drawn into it. And to me, I felt I had knowledge and expertise that others did not have in doing high quality development. Our city is very affluent. It's got incredible schools. The residential neighborhoods are fantastic, but the downtown, particularly when I got involved, was lacking. It was a suburban model of development from really the 1950s where you drove down our main street, which is a very large street, but you drove down it. You had surface parking lots. People would pull in and park right in front of a small business, a small building. And part of what I did in my land use, my real estate career, was see Arlington County transformed. The Arlington of my youth is nothing like the Arlington County of today. And Arlington County, for those of your listeners, is the suburb of Washington, D.C., where the Pentagon is. But they did a very effective use of Metro. And so it got redeveloped in a really great way. It's a really wonderful community with mixed-use development, walkable streets, and the like. And I participated in that, representing developers as a land use attorney. And so I felt we could replicate some of that, more appropriate to Falls Church's scale and sensibilities. But I believed I had some expertise that others did not have. And so I thought I would lend that knowledge and experience to help redevelop our downtown in particular. And so my focus in my, one of the things that caused me to get involved more heavily was just the ability and interest in trying to redevelop our downtowns. And we've done that, over these past years through urban planning, through, working with developers, and really that's pretty cool stuff, at least in my opinion, over the past 10 plus years or so.
I understand that early in your time as mayor, Falls Church took on a major challenge, which was the need to rebuild its aging high school. Can you take us back to that moment? What was happening in that time period and what made that such a pivotal issue?
Well, schools have always been one of the central I would say, themes or crown jewels of Falls Church. So people move to Falls Church because the schools are really good and they're small. That's one thing that appealed to me is, even if they were good, I love a small cohort of people where everybody gets to know everybody. You grow up with the same people. They go to kindergarten with you. They don't move to different schools. We have the same people basically stay as a cohort through the whole time. And so schools are tremendously important to our community. We had a high school that was, 60 odd years old. It was just crumbling and falling apart. But given how small our community was, it's a really big ask to pay for a new $100 or $120 million high school with the same tax base as we had. And so people wanted a new high school. They just weren't sure how we were going to get one. We did a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation, a lot of forums to really gauge what do people want. And we did some study. Could we renovate the existing school? Is that the most cost-efficient way to get a new and improved school? Is build it out, put new things in it. And it turned out that really wasn't that efficient. And as someone who has a development background, I realized that the property itself had value. And so ultimately what we did is we took our site and we made a more vertical high school and carved off 10 acres. And this 10 acres are pretty close to the West Falls Church Metro. So, and also to I-66 and some other important transit locations. And so we carved off these 10 acres and then we set about how to develop them to maximize value and also quality of life. And really to look out for what's in the best interest of the community with this redevelopment. And so that was a multi-year process of a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion, getting some expertise on board outside of what's in the city itself right now. So we had different groups and consultants come in and give us their thoughts. And ultimately we put out an RFP to get bids. But we had our own vision of what we wanted. And it wasn't just let's sell this for the highest and best use. If we were a private landowner, we would just say, who's going to write the biggest check for us? And we'd be done. But because we're an ongoing concern, tax revenue is very important as well. So, that's as important as your upfront money in a lot of ways. And to my mind, it was more important than the check we got on day one. But more important was the check we're going to get every year in terms of meals tax, sales tax, business tax, property tax, a lot of different streams of tax revenue. And then beyond that, it's also quality of life. It could be the highest and best use and most income would be a steel mill, which of course it wasn't, but it could be a use like that really doesn't add much to the community other than dollars and cents. And so we were cognizant of that as well. What would add to the community? What would create a sense of place? What would put Falls Church on the map? So for us, it wasn't just about dollars and cents. It was for even things more significant than that. And so we came up with an idea that really would be a mix of uses, which would also mitigate risk in the long run. If the office market goes downhill, we don't have all our eggs in one basket. And so ultimately, what we sought was a pretty broad mix of uses, even if some of them were out of favor at the moment. We thought in the long run that they'll come in favor, and we're a small place anyway. If they're out of favor, then just do you're only doing one building, you can figure it out. And so ultimately, this development has an office, which is pretty out of favor, but it's a medical office. It's sort of a niche office, and it's doing great. We have a hotel. Hotels generate a lot of really good taxes, transit occupancy taxes, and other taxes that are very favorable. We also have multifamily apartments and something called micro units, which are very small apartments. We have a university next door. Virginia Tech is close by in a small facility, so we thought that might be beneficial to them. We have a senior living as well. We have a retail promenade. It's required to be anchored by a grocery store. Grocery stores throw off tons of great tax revenue. They're open 18 hours or more a day, so they create a lot of life, a lot of activity. We have some civic space in there, which I think ultimately would go to a music school. It's adjacent to the new high school. And so anyway, it all pretty much came together. And it's essentially, at least the first phase, which is the major phase, has been built out and has begun occupancy. And the new high school is built and occupied, and our taxes have come down the past couple of years. So it turned out pretty well.
That's incredible. I love this lesson that emerges from what you talked about. We said in the introduction that part of the character of Falls Church was a high level of civic engagement, and we coupled that with a high level of education. So what I think I just heard you say was, we had this long process. We engaged people throughout the process so that when we reached its conclusion, not only were there no surprises, but there were no obstacles, right? Everyone had a chance to feel like they had inputted meaningfully into the process. Am I getting the right conclusion from you there?
Yes, you are. I mean, that was the idea and that was the plan, and it wasn't an accident. As I said, for me, with land use, cases go a lot easier when you spend time with everybody. If you try to steamroll someone, you don't want to spend time with them, they could just get angry, and everybody turns up at the hearing, and they're all mad, and your hearing lasts forever, and it has an uncertain outcome. So I learned that lesson early on in land use, where you're much better off talking to people early, listening to them, valuing their opinion, than you are trying to steamroll it, and it just doesn't turn out well. And so that's something I took with me to government, that you got, I mean, it's who I am anyway. And so it wasn't really some secret lesson, but just being respectful to people, which I think is sort of the central theme. Well, it goes to listening to them, it goes to all sorts of things. But I think just respecting other people, everyone is deserving of respect. You think their opinion might be a little bit wacky or whatever it is, they're entitled to it. They have different perspectives, and who says you know everything? So I've gone through my whole career learning from a whole bunch of other people. And that's how I view kind of the world.
So I want to turn our attention to another experience that you had. Perhaps it's one that even tested your ability to bring together people in a pretty significant way. You happened to be chairing the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, a coalition of 13 jurisdictions representing about 2.5 million people, right in the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, it was an extraordinary time of uncertainty and urgency, and collaboration wasn't just helpful, it was essential in that moment. You were responsible with your colleagues to align across local governments, coordinate with the Commonwealth of Virginia, to respond to federal guidance, all while managing public health, communications, emergency services, all in real time. What was that like, to be in the midst of a period when you had to lead, but like all the rules had changed? There was nothing that had prepared anyone for this experience we all went through.
Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging times, but in a lot of ways, it brought out the best in people. People did roll up their sleeves. They worked together. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty. It was obviously very scary times for really everyone in the world. But it was great to see people work together in some ways as they'd never done before. And I think we did some pretty good work. So I'm proud of my experiences with the organization and the region, how people came together. But it's tough times. It was challenging times. A couple months before, you're worrying about coordinating stormwater runoff. That's the biggest deal we're working on. And, a little bit later, you're talking about people dying, in your communities. And it gets real important real quick to make sure that you coordinate what people are doing in public and vaccinations and all sorts of things like that. So it was exciting times. It was trying times, but I am proud of the way the region worked together.
Is there a particular moment, maybe early in the COVID experience, when the dawning of this need was kind of awakening for all of us? Was there some moment that you realized the magnitude, not just of the COVID situation, but the magnitude of the collaboration that was going to need to happen here, and your role in helping to pull that together?
Well, I tell you, it's hard to say, but it just came on really quick. I mean, 1 minute, like I said, we're worrying about stormwater runoff or things like that. And then very shortly after that, I mean, to me, my own thought was, when I heard about this, you always just think that the people were saying the sky's falling. When it first came out, because we hear about these things, right? Periodically, you hear about bird flu and swine flu and different things that could be turned into major epidemics, pandemics, and 99% of them don't come to pass. And this one, I mean, my initial reaction was, it's just another kind of blip that will come and go. But pretty darn quick, realized that it wasn't. And so we were going to 3 calls a week. We were meeting 3 times a week, local electeds at first, just to figure out, what's going on? What are you doing? And so trying to coordinate things like, you closing your libraries down. How are you doing this? What are you doing with your services? Because everything was so new. It was really hard to get your arms around what to do. And I think at first people didn't even realize, like, really the full extent of what you had to do to prevent it. And just the whole 9 yards. And there wasn't a vaccine at first as well. And so these scary times, I think everyone hunkered down, but with government, you really couldn't hunker down. You were supposed to be on the leading edge and protecting people, and just, going into your house and closing the door works if you're an individual, but it doesn't work if you're a government and you have services to provide and other things. So very difficult times.
I don't mean to dwell in negative, but I just have to wonder, was there ever a sleepless night where you agonized over a decision that had to be coordinated through all these governing entities?
Look, certainly there was a lot of conversation and thought that went into decisions. But the good thing, our organization, the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, it's a governmental entity, but we do not have authority to impose our will on different jurisdictions. So again, a lot of this goes back to the idea of collaboration, cooperation, working together. So, many times we had to coordinate our requests. For example, we might make a request to the governor. So Northern Virginia ended up getting vaccines before the rest of the state of Virginia, not because we're special, just we had the infrastructure in place already to receive and distribute vaccines, to give the shots, and other places didn't. And so, those are things we advocated for so that people would start getting shots right away instead of having to sit in a box somewhere where they didn't have the infrastructure in place. So, we had requests we made. We tried to make decisions collectively so that half our libraries weren't open and the other half were closed. It just wasn't good messaging. We tried to develop best practices and best protocols so that we were all on the same sheet of music, so people weren't questioning, why are you doing this? They're doing that. It was really important for public confidence as well to not have 13 different ways of dealing with something. You have to all speak with one voice and one message and collaborate and coordinate those efforts so that people understood and then had confidence in the decisions that we were making. So, there was a lot of what we did, and we sought expertise to do that and sought collaboration and we're again working together so we could have a similar messaging throughout the whole area.
That's one of the things I learned from these RELI-sponsored interviews. I've had a chance to visit with a whole bunch of civic leaders throughout Northern Virginia. This idea that collaboration is kind of built into the DNA of how the jurisdictions in Northern Virginia work with each other. And I'm curious if you have any insight about how that developed or maybe even just what makes it successful.
Well, I would say this. In probably other communities, you have a urban center, and then you have a bunch of maybe land or farmland or agricultural land, and then you have the next urban center. In Northern Virginia, they spill onto each other, and they're connected in ways not just with roads and highways, but like our transit system, Metro. You'd stop in one stop, you're in Arlington, next stop, you're in Fairfax County, and next stop, you're in another jurisdiction. So the boundaries are very porous. I think, especially in the inner suburbs, the demographics are similar. People are educated. They have similar backgrounds. They work for the federal government. And so I think, tend to have not striking differences you might find somewhere else where, this is the agricultural side, here's the urban side. You have different points of view. I think this has to do with just the fact that in some ways we're kind of a large suburb. Northern Virginia, it's an economic powerhouse. There's millions of people that live here, but yet the origins of kind of everybody was connected to Washington, D.C. A lot of government people working downtown. Now, a lot of people who are government contractors, military, a lot of people kind of share the same background. That's changing. Technology is moving into Northern Virginia. HQ2 has moved to Arlington. We have a lot of tech industry. And so maybe over time things will evolve. But our early history was, related in a lot of ways to the expansion of government after, during, and after World War II. And so many people work for government in that capacity or the military.
So now in your role at George Mason University, you're preparing the next generation of real estate and community development professionals. And I'm wondering, beyond the obvious technical and analytical skills that are required, how do you think about teaching leadership to the next generation of people with a real estate background?
To me, a lot of it goes back to that notion of vision, having something you really believe in. Like the people who are really successful in real estate are the people that have a vision of what they want to accomplish. building something. It doesn't have to be the highest end thing, but, building things of quality, building things to last, building things that are functional, building things that are attractive. Real estate is a lot of fun. To me, that's the fun of real estate. Just the architecture about it, the idea that it can function really well. And so to me, having a vision of what you want to build is very similar in some ways to what I was doing in the city of Falls Church. I had a vision of what I wanted my community, and particularly our downtown, to look like and to function and to be, and the services it would provide. And when you're in the real estate business, that's kind of the same thing. I mean, your overreaching goal might not be to make the totality of the community, but you're making a piece of that. So when you build that hotel, you're building a piece of a community, and it can be a lasting legacy you give, and that your children and their grandchildren can drive by that hotel and say, Grandpa built that 40 years ago. It's still a beautiful thing. It's still attractive. It still functions and services people, and it makes some money along the way. And so to me, you look at New York City and the grand buildings in New York. I mean, I'm sure you spent time in New York City. I mean, I think it's a ton of fun to walk down, some of the major streets in New York, or even the nooks and crannies, and see grand old buildings and their architecture, how they're representative of their time, and the beauty in grand old buildings. So to me, it sort of goes back to the same thing, a vision. What do you want to impart to the next generation? What do you want your fingerprints on? What do you want to be known for? What's your legacy?
I imagine there are people listening to this, civic leaders in communities all over the country, who will say, well, the words make all kinds of sense. Of course, we have to have a vision. But I also imagine that you have students who struggle with trying to articulate a vision. Oh, they can tell you they want to build a 20 story building with X amount of square feet and a business model of, X commercial versus residential versus retail, or whatever it's going to be. But it sounds to me like vision means something more to you than just a good business plan. Can you kind of explain to me what you mean? What would you see as a quality vision? What do you see as a full vision when it's expressed for a community like Falls Church, as opposed to just the business model of what it takes to make a project viable?
Well, so I think your vision depends on what you're doing. If you're a mayor, your vision is going to be different than if you're a surgeon. But for me as mayor, my vision of my community was a vibrant, walkable place, a place that had great schools, a place that was safe, a place that was attractive, that attracted visitors, a dynamic place, a place that, cared about people, and provided great services. So, it depends. If you're a surgeon, your vision might be to produce great quality outcomes, to make sure your patients feel you've done every possible thing for them, that you're available, that you go the extra mile, that, when needed, you're there for them. And so I think it depends on, what you're interested in. And so, over time, what I'm interested in has evolved in some ways. When I was 25, I probably wasn't thinking about cities and walkability and things like that. And so, people, as they grow, they learn and have their own vision of what they want to do. And people's vision doesn't have to be for their whole community. It could be for their family. I want to spend time with my kids. I want my kids to be educated. I want, them to be in whatever it might be. And so I think it depends on what your profession is or what your aspirations are as to what your vision might become. And it's going to be unique, hopefully, for everyone.
David, let's talk about what's going on right now. And we should put a timestamp on this and say that we're speaking on April 10th, and things are changing. As you see it, what are some of the federal actions or policies that are taking place right now and recently that cause you the most concern or have the greatest sense of disruption in your community? And what's at risk as a result?
Well, I have to say, my community, Northern Virginia, is very heavily dependent on federal government, and the relationship is very strong. Falls Church probably has one of the highest percentages of federal employees of anywhere in the United States. So we have a lot of federal employees. And I would say the layoffs that are going on and the changes that are happening at some of these large federal organizations and federal agencies are likely to have a very big impact on the people of my city. And so I think that's going to be a real challenge to work through that, however that might turn out. And it seems like there's a lot of change going on. Things are being challenged in the court. So I think it remains to be seen how, in fact, this will turn out. But I think that's a big challenge for Falls Church. We just have, I have a neighbor who both people work for the EPA. I mean, if both of them got laid off, I don't know what they're going to do. So there certainly are some challenges in that regard in the city of Falls Church.
And so there's sort of immediate economic repercussions of this, but then there's longer term if those employment positions are no longer in the federal government, they may not exist anywhere in the metro region, might actually force people to move away from the region.
I think that's a distinct possibility. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, so it's hard to say how this will all turn out, but it certainly has that potential, which I think will present some real challenges to many families in the city.
David, I have one last question for you. You've led through some of the most complex challenges a community can face, from school redevelopment to the COVID crisis and all the coordination. And now, of course, you're helping shape future leaders through your work in higher education. With everything that local governments are up against today, what gives you hope for the future?
Well, I mean, I tell you, people's nature, if you listen to people, if you work collaboratively with people, then you can solve problems. I think one of the challenges today is it feels like people really aren't working very well with each other for whatever reason. I think if everyone could get back to trying to solve problems collaboratively, collectively, we can get a whole lot more done. And so my hope is not for local government, state government, but just all government and all organizations, that people get back more to just working with each other. I think when we do, we're going to have a lot more success and a lot more happiness. So my hope would be maybe people could just kind of get back together and stop worrying about what side everybody's on or what label they have, and really just work together and collaboratively. I think we can get a whole lot done.
What would be your message to people in this moment who are feeling overwhelmed or discouraged or even defeated? What advice would help them stay grounded and forward-looking?
Well, I mean, I would just say hang tough. I mean, I think Churchill had a speech basically along the lines of never give up, never, ever, ever give up. And that was pretty much the end of his speech, or at least as I understand it, many years ago. And I would just say that's a life lesson I've learned too, and things I've done in life. Most of the time, I'm not the fastest or the smartest, but many things I've done that I've done half well on is just because I hung in there. And so I would just say to most people, hang tough. Things change. You can influence the future, and you can certainly influence your own future and your own fate. And so, keep at it, keep working, never surrender.
David Tarter, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for being open to this conversation. It's been wonderful visiting with you.
Thank you. Same to you. I really enjoyed it.
Again, thank you to my guest, David Tarter, whose leadership across local and regional government and now in higher education offers valuable insight for those working to strengthen their communities. And thank you again to RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University, for their sponsorship of this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps others discover the show. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. This episode was edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or a comment about today's topic, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. Do you have a story of lessons learned on your journey to leadership? Click the podcast guest link in the program notes. I'm always looking for instructive and inspiring voices to feature on the show. Upon reflection, David Tarter's story is a powerful reminder that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up with clarity, humility, and a willingness to work with others through complexity to get things done. From navigating the redevelopment of a high school campus to coordinating a regional response during the COVID crisis, his experience reveals just how much progress depends on trust, process, and persistence. Whether serving a small city, leading across jurisdictions, or preparing the next generation of community builders, David's path shows that effective leadership is grounded in listening carefully, engaging thoughtfully, and balancing bold vision with day-to-day responsibility. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, David's example invites us to lead with patience, purpose, and a steady hand, to keep our focus on the people in the communities we're here to serve. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.